Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're happy to have you here, and we're looking forward to an exciting and engaging discussion today. We have a couple of quick reminders up on the screen before we go ahead and get started. And one reminder is that we do have these every week, every Thursday. So make sure you register. It's up. You can register for the next 2 weeks right now. I also want to remind you guys to make sure that you are asking questions, and we will be answering them throughout the call. We want to make sure that we get to as many questions as we can because we really drive our agendas by the questions you guys are asking and what you want to hear. So right now I want to go ahead and bring on our CEO, Michelle Hardy, as well as our Director of Operations, Jessica Pearson. Hi, guys.
Hi, everybody. Thank you,
Hi.
Alyssa, for being on and for kicking us off this Thursday morning. Welcome to Live Meetings Updates 2020 and beyond. We're glad to have everybody on here with us today and get started. So,
all right, sounds good. Before we get started, I have one more item that we just need to take care of. Hey, Jess, are we lawyers?
I wasn't last time I checked. Michelle, are you giving legal advice here?
No legal advice today. We're just sharing our expertise. So we're advising everybody to consult an attorney for any type of legal questions that you guys do have. Please, this is just our advice. We want to make that clear. Same with the panel. Everybody that's going to be on today is sharing their advice, their best practices from their experience. But again, we're not attorneys, so it's just advice. Thanks,
guys. And just as a reminder, our intention today is to be open and transparent as we share how we're moving forward during the pandemic. And we want to make sure that we discuss upfront that our information is based on perspective. It's not intended to be taken as a prediction of the future or legal advice. We're just providing information based on our years of event and meeting management experiences. So speaking of experience, Michelle, can you let everyone know who we are and what we're doing here today?
Of course. Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate you being on and doing the introductions for us. Meeting Sites Pro is a full-service worldwide meeting and event planning company. We work across industries to provide personal services to our clients and their attendees. We're passionate about meetings, and we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary just this March. I'm very, very, very proud of that milestone for us, and I'll never forget it, not only because it's 20 years in business, but also because it marked 20 years of service to our clients, and that it was about the time our whole country shut down due to COVID-19.
Yeah, so I think our world was turned upside down there along with everyone else's and our whole industry. The meetings came to a halt, and then they started postponing to later in the year. The next year, many of them went virtual. We, and Michelle specifically, started reaching out then to industry colleagues and leaders from across the country. It was really admirable. She spent a lot of time talking to just colleagues and people she had interacted with in the past, and noticed obviously that many of them were furloughed or laid off work, and many were feeling lost, uninspired, frustrated, angry, depressed, and just confused how to move forward.
Yeah, and I was really thought this was going to be a temporary thing. And as the weeks went by and led to months, I realized this is not temporary, like all of you, and this is probably something we're going to be dealing with for a long time. So we started to put together some think tanks with, again, industry leaders from across the country to come up with best practices for face-to-face meetings. We discussed meeting room setups, social distancing for the meeting room setups, food and beverage, delivery, flow, attendee hotel and venue cleanliness and hygiene, and many more, which we are still talking about today on these live meetings updates 2020 and beyond. The goal of these programs were born out of trying to help industry keep moving forward and to inspire our industry and to help us all rise together. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's nothing else summarizes it better than that. So Jess, are you feeling inspired yet?
I am ready to go. Speaking of that, maybe we'll talk a little bit about really what we're going to dive in today and what our purpose is today. Michelle, do you want to discuss this?
Yeah, so I'm really, these are the purpose of this meeting. We want to make sure everybody leaves this meeting today taking at least one tangible asset with you. Just like we do every week, we want to make sure you have, whether it's inspired or an actual tool or resource to take with you. We'll share some of our best practices throughout, but we're also at the very end going to share tips and tricks from everybody on the panel with each one of you to hopefully have you guys take a tangible away from you. But we're on this to elevate each other. So it's going to be positive, to inspire, to share resources, to give hope, and all in all, to get back to business. And in an effort to get back to business, we surveyed hundreds of HCPs, which are healthcare professionals from across the country, asking questions about how they're feeling about face-to-face meetings during the pandemic. And we have the data to share. Jess has been sharing some of this each week, but I'm going to have her share some, updated results with you. So take it away, Jess.
Yeah, so those who have been on these calls before have seen a variation of this graph. We are continuing to receive results and update them. These two pie charts we're going to share today represent our polled HCPs' feelings on both getting back to meetings and getting back to travel. And the thing that we felt really inspired by is if you look at these graphs, the largest chunks are those who are ready to get back to meeting or ready to get back to travel. We do have a pretty significant group that has some hesitations about both these activities, and that's really what we've focused in on with these calls and with our activities in general, is discussing those hesitation, recognizing that those hesitations are really real and that we have some of those same hesitations, and addressing those in our safe meeting planning.
Thank you, Jessica. We received many questions about contracting clause as well during the pandemic. When it comes to face-to-face meetings and contracts, there's obviously no one size that fits all. Contract clauses vary case by case, state by state, region by region, and company by company. So it's always important, again, that you consult your attorney for your specific requirements. But that said, Jess, will you share some of Meeting Sites Pro's best practices around some of the questions we received around contracting?
Yeah, and so the slide that's up now has a little more detail on this, but as a summary, the first bullet point we wanted to discuss was kind of the difference between termination versus cancellation. A cancellation is when one party needs to cancel the contract, and that typically goes into kind of your standard cancellation where for some reason one party doesn't want to have the event anymore, and that's where we started talking about cancellation penalties and rebooking clauses and that sort of stuff. A termination is when the parties can't have the meeting. So we found it really important when we're talking about these force majeure issues to refer to it as a termination. It's not that we're canceling, it's that the meeting can't happen, it's being terminated. The second bullet point we wanted to discuss was about force majeure and practicality and possibility. And note that these are really all the same. They're pretty interchangeable, and it really just depends on what state you're in, what it's called. But this is a common law principle. It's applicable even if it's not specifically written in your contract, but we do recommend keeping it written in your contract. And it makes it so if the event can't happen because of an unforeseeable circumstance, that the meeting can be terminated.
And that brings up, Jess, a really good point, because it was brought up during our conversation just this morning with the panel about some hotels maybe considering COVID a currently known situation. So if you enter a contract now, that force majeure may not apply. So I would, again, you should consult an attorney on that. But if you're concerned about that, you can put specific language in your force majeure that includes COVID. I would not specify it to just be COVID, or change some of your broad language, but to mention that even now with the COVID situation, that would cover you for those circumstances, right?
And I think what I've learned from some of the calls we've been on, and again, this isn't legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, we can't say that enough, but is that it's not necessarily COVID that's creating the force majeure situation. It's the concerns over travel being curtailed. It's the restrictions over government requirements for meeting sizes in those areas. It's the general concern of a pandemic situation where disease could spread at these programs. And it's those requirements and restrictions and guidelines that are creating the force majeure situation. So I think it's important that if you're going to add that into your force majeure clause, you're not just saying COVID, you're outlining those consequences of COVID that are still unforeseen that would create the meeting not being able to happen.
And out of this pandemic's come, I'm sure frustration with contract clause has been around for a little while, but it's mainly been in the forefront since COVID. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and so it's really similar to force majeure, at least to our understanding and from the knowledge we've gained from the meetings we've been on. But what it covers different from force majeure isn't just the impracticality of the program, but that the program potentially could still happen, but it would look so different from what it was originally intended that the whole purpose of the program would be changed. And there you still have kind of the out, so to speak, to not hold the program. If it's going to be so materially and radically different from what the initial purpose is, then you have an out to cancel or to terminate as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think one of the things that we've been dealing with is when this hit in March, we had advance paid a bunch of our hotel properties, and it was very frustrating, and it was a very really arduous process to get our money back. And out of that has come our need for, the adding refund timing language for termination and cancellation into our contracts, which is a best practice in our opinion at this point now. Can you share some of our other best practices, Jessica?
Yeah, and I think to the point on the refund timing, that clause kind of goes both ways. A termination clause should outline that if there is a penalty, who's ever canceling pays that amount in a certain amount of time, regardless of which party is canceling. Some of our other best practices, including having a contract addendum written by a lawyer, keeping your interests in mind, and giving that to your venue partner prior to the contract being written so that those clauses can be incorporated into the final contract. And then something that we can't stress enough is to have everything in writing. Don't make assumptions. Remove any ambiguity. You don't want clauses in your contract saying like pricing to be determined or rate subject to change or anything like that. It's been really important to us and has really served us well to have kind of an ironclad contract that we're talking about all these details ahead of time.
There's a responsibility, just moving beyond this on another thing that everybody's brought up, is the responsibility of safety being shared. So at meetings and events, the shared responsibility will make things run more smoothly. We are taking advance opportunities at Meeting Sites Pro to pre-communicate with attendees and to use a code of conduct. So Jessica and I want to review some of that with all of you. And again, the code of conduct it's really important that it's communicated up front and that you share it with the attendees. It's not just something that is shared with us. And Alyssa, I'm going to ask you to please advance the slide so that it reflects the code of conduct. Okay, so the first thing is it's intended to share information and educate and set expectations up front.
It also allows the venue and planner to outline those safety guidelines that are going to be in place and really educate on what's going to be enacted.
And then ensure that the attendees know what will be expected from them once they get on site so there's not surprises.
It allows an opportunity for those who do not agree with this code of conduct to participate in an alternate fashion, maybe virtually, maybe next year. And by requesting attendees assign this ahead of time, you're asking for confirmation that they've read and understood these expectations.
Absolutely. And this is the idea of this is to reduce questions, concerns, or again, surprises on site. Jessica, do you have any other thoughts on this code of conduct or any pre-meeting communication?
Yeah, I think the big thing here is we talked a lot about contracts and then moved into this code of conduct. And there's a big takeaway here that in this situation, the discussion isn't always necessarily a legal one. A lot of times it's partnership. So talking with your hotel, maybe the contract does outline a specific attrition clause, but given the circumstance, there can be more flexibility on that. Even though you have the ability to do a force majeure contract, maybe you're able to rebook that event in partnership with that hotel. It's really talking about kind of those non-legal routes and the partnership aspect to it. And that goes to this code of conduct. That's also a partnership and a shared responsibility between you and the attendees. I think the biggest takeaway from a pre-planning aspect is just that communication.
Absolutely. And I'm going to move us on to the next topic that they asked us to review again this morning, they being the audience, you all out there. We're moving on to talking about some food and delivery options and flow for face-to-face meetings during the pandemic. So obviously, food and beverage minimums and space to room ratios are all out the window right now. We're still trying to understand what we can do right now, and it may change tomorrow. And it's just not the same also from location to location. So moving forward, we can expect more solutions that lower back of the house labor requirements and maintain safety. And some of these things will include some of these things may include some of the pre-packaged high quality foods and meal kits like bento boxes. Jess, can you name a few others?
Yeah, so there's going to be partially cooked, ready to use, ready to heat, ready to assemble foods. One thing I've seen that I thought was cool, I don't know if anyone else thought it was cool, but was kind of those bowl meals. So where you have the starch, vegetable, and meat all in one bowl, kind of like a stir fry. One thing we've talked a lot about are kind of these serviced buffets. Michelle, do you want to go into a little bit about what we see there and how that could work?
Yeah, so we have a 650 person program coming up in just a couple of weeks in Denver. And so this is like, we've been showing the setup for this. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to have a buffet line with rope and stanchion on it. And then they'll walk down one side of it and come back the other side. And there'll be an attendant that plates their food and then slides the plate down at the end. And there's plexiglass protecting both parties. And the servers are wearing masks and they're gloved. So it's basically a touchless buffet. And it's one of my favorite ideas. So I was initially saying when Soup Plantation closed down with all of this and buffets were not going to be in our future, this was a great option to still allow us to feel some sort of normalcy when we have buffets. So I'm loving that setup.
And other things we're seeing are going to more a plated meal. You can do that traditionally where you serve it at the table. One big thing we are seeing is kind of that switch to keeping the plate covers on the plates and letting the attendee take that off themselves. So there's some layer of safety there. We're also seeing plated meals served at kind of this served buffet where the attendee walks up to a plexiglass barrier with a server behind it and they get their meal there. That can also work with like boxed meals, bagged meals. Another thing we're seeing where maybe more of a presentation aspect is needed is those plated meals are kind of displayed but covered to add more of a presentation aspect to it. Michelle, is there anything I'm forgetting? Any other best practices to share?
Well, that tray in the upper left-hand corner is like in school when you used to get your school tray, but it looks a lot better, obviously. I think that was from the All Together Expo. It's a great display. And we have Nicole on that's going to be talking about that meeting that they just had for, I think it was 1,600 in-person individuals. But that display is just really beautiful. And it doesn't, nothing's sacrificed in doing it like that. So I really like that. Also for receptions, there's a lot of questions that have come up around how to have these receptions in the bottom right-hand corner. This is an option for like, instead of tray passed hors d'oeuvres, you can see that there's an attendant back behind a plexiglass with the mask on, and they already have the displayed appetizers shown. And so when somebody walks up, they are just handed that directly from the server, and it looks just like what's up front. So that's an option instead of tray passed hors d'oeuvres. So I think the key to food and beverage service is to remove density places, and that's like places where people congregate, such as coffee at coffee table, and remove shared serving sources. We've showed you some ideas of that, and here's another idea of that. So this is a unique idea that I found when I was scouring the internet this week. I know it looks silly at first, but it definitely accomplishes the goal of getting the food and drink to the person without having to have both hands. And as with everything we're doing in meetings and events right now, it's really taking an open mind and being creative from all parties to achieve success. And much of that is happening for our food and beverage functions, but also for our meeting space. And they're all going to look and feel differently. And, you know, this is something I could get my arms around. I'm always struggling with my paperwork or the stuff I have in my hands. And I have a meal and a drink now that I can take out with that. Jessica, before I let you go, since March of 2020, we've been exploring many food and beverage options, and a lot of them have been around virtual meeting food delivery. Can you share some of the resources that we use for those at this time?
Yeah, I think some of the things we've seen, and one idea we really liked is with the virtual meetings, you don't have that sense of connection as you do when everyone's in the same room. So something we've seen to combat that is like a delivery of a quick gift basket prior to the meeting. What this does is not only does it have excitement about the meeting, but it also provides kind of a link between the attendees. You can do things like a coffee mug that everyone has that you're all on. You all have coffee prior to the meeting. You can do some snacks so people have snacks during the meeting. There's also services like Dineable, and I know we're going to talk about Grubhub in a minute, so that everyone has the opportunity to have a meal, and you can still kind of create that same lunch meeting feel as you would with an in-person meeting.
Perfect. I mean, I love all the creativity and all the stuff that we're doing. So thanks for sharing that. And speaking of food delivery options, Jessica, I'm going to thank you first. Thank you for being on, and thank you for sharing
Thank
some of our
you.
stuff. I really do appreciate it and helping our industry move forward. Okay, so speaking of food delivery options, I want to welcome Nick from Grubhub to come on. So Nick, if you can turn your camera on, we're going to be discussing a little bit about your, welcome Nick, about your food delivery for meetings and your just the services you offer to meetings and events in general. So go ahead and take that away.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, thank you for the introduction, Michelle, and congrats, 20 years in business. That's awesome. Very here. So, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this. I think anytime that we can connect as professionals in this industry, the world that we're in right now, is a good thing. And so very happy to be taking part in this today. So again, thank you. As we all know, the ever increasing new normal, at least currently and for the foreseeable future, in many instances, as it relates to corporate events, is they are being held virtually. And as a result, event and meeting planners are really scrambling for solutions that will help to provide both hosting organizations and attendees with greater value over a traditional webinar. And a prime way to do that, as we all know, is to provide those attendees with food. And the ultimate way to do that is utilizing Grubhub's corporate account to facilitate all of that. And that's backed up by the following. So we work with a third party called Tech Validate. They do a ton of research for us, and their most recent round of surveys was with companies that are using us to support their virtual events and providing those meeting attendees with food for those events. And one of the questions centered around what's the biggest benefit of using the corporate account for these virtual events? And answers range everything from differentiation to keeping costs low, time saving, ease of use. The one response that had the biggest positive response rate to it was increased attendee satisfaction. People are having a more enjoyable time when they've got food as they're sitting in front of their computer. That, which probably isn't that big of a surprise to all of us, right?
No.
The next stat that I thought was really interesting, Michelle, was we had asked those companies surveyed, how has this affected your attendance for these virtual meetings? Literally 100% of them have said that they are seeing an increase in attendance when compared to previous years. So by utilizing the corporate account, we're bringing more people to these events, and they're having a better experience overall. And there's a number of ways that the corporate platform helps to facilitate all of that. The five kind of key areas, I would hone in on is remote flexibility. Everyone can enjoy their meals no matter where they are calling in from. Secondly, from a hosting organization standpoint, each attendee is really going to have a budget and rules specific for their for them for that particular event. On the cost front, it's also a great way to keep costs low, especially when compared to, say, a gift card, for example. With a gift card, I'm sending somebody $25, I'm out that expense regardless. However, using the corporate account stipend functionality, you're only invoiced for what was actually spent. So if I give an attendee a $25 stipend on the day of the event, they only spend $20 worth it. There's a net savings there if when compared to utilizing a gift card. Fourthly, I would say the network. I mean, we have got a massive network that consists of over 300,000 restaurant partners, and we're in over 4,000 cities. So 99% of your meeting attendees are going to have some type of delivery network where they live.
Yep.
And then lastly, consolidation. I don't know about you, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard from clients that one of their biggest pain points is having stacks of invoices from multiple vendors that they work with, and utilizing the corporate account, we're able to actually consolidate everything under one invoice for food expenses. And the way that functionally the way that the corporate platform works is what you will have seen on this slide at this point. As you can see, this is kind of a wash, rinse, repeat kind of a cycle for utilizing the corporate account for a multitude of events. And it actually is really efficient both from a time standpoint and just from a number of step standpoint. Pre-event, there's really, as a hosting organization, all you have to do is go into create that group within the admin portal, give that group some rules, upload your attendees, and get that welcome email out. All told, we're talking about 30 seconds of work, if that.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. From the attendees' perspective, the pre-event work is even easier. All they have to do is open up that welcome email, click the little button that says create a password. They create their password, and then they're done. That's all they have to do to set up their profile under your corporate account. Now, on the day of the event, from the attendees' perspective, all they really need to do is log in and order that food and enjoy. And right at the center of the screen there, it will say their name, Sarah, Jeff, Mike, Michelle, Nick, whatever their name is. You have a line of credit to use on your order. Select to apply. And when they activate.
Sorry, Nick, just real quick. What about kosher or other dietary restrictions?
Great question. So once I click to find food, right at the top of the screen there's a search bar. You can search by dietary restriction, by cuisine type, by restaurant name, you name it. Perfect. There are various ways that you can filter your search results as well.
And do you guys have locations in Canada and Mexico as well? Somebody's saying they've been considering partnership with Grubhub, but they do have all over the US, including Canada and Mexico. Do you have any locations there?
Great question. Unfortunately, our operations are only in the United States. So there's not much that we would be able to do with those, those attendees who are, out of the country.
Yeah.
For those who are here, we've got them covered. Absolutely.
Do you have any options? I mean, do you guys know of any international like in Mexico or Canada that you could refer them to, or not really?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt.
What are the other options? Like, is there a Grubhub equivalent in Mexico or Canada?
Candidly, I know there are. I don't know their names off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I'll be happy to get that information for you if you want to send it out to everyone on the call. Happy to provide that.
That'd be fantastic, because that would help if they were using you and then had a resource in those other areas. The other thing is, what about suburbs? Do you have locations in suburbs? Because you mentioned major cities.
Yeah, I mean, our network ranges from, huge metropolitan locales like a Miami or a Los Angeles and New York, all the way down to, smaller cities that may only even have, thousands of residents within them. I have yet to come across a given locale in the state of Florida, which is what I cover, for example, where there isn't at least some type of network. I'm talking small towns up in the Panhandle, little towns near Lake Okeechobee. I found a network everywhere. So, most of the time, dare I say almost all the time, there's going to be a network.
Perfect. Okay, beautiful. So if I wanted to order then for virtual or in person, right? You guys do both. Grubhub's been in the business of doing in-person ones for anybody that wants to order for years.
Absolutely. Corporate clients were really our focus when we first got started, and the traditional use of the platform really is for companies that have meal programs. So maybe there's catering to the office every Friday, or every employee gets $10 a day to use towards food. And that is kind of the historical use of the platform. We're just fortunate in that the system was designed in such a manner that we're absolutely able to facilitate virtual meetings, remote employee working, and things of that nature right now.
So what is the best way to market Grubhub to hotels, at a hotel for planners?
That's a great question. I mean, there's a number of different ways you can go about it. We have various resources internally that we are happy to provide to our clients and our partners that aid in those. Marketing slicks, internal memorandums that can be manipulated or edited however you want. I think what most companies that we're seeing are doing lately is, as soon as somebody registers to attend an event, if that hosting company has a Grubhub corporate account, that they're including that in their immediate communication to those folks after they register. Hey, thank you for signing up to attend our event. As an additional thank you, we're going to go ahead and provide you X amount of dollars to order food on our corporate account the day of the event. Keep an eye out for the welcome email, from them, so on and so forth.
Do you charge a fee for your corporate account services?
Great question. There is no setup fee. There's no monthly fee, annual fee, renewal fee, none of that stuff. The only thing that we're charging for the corporate account is the corporate account service fee. And that is a small percentage that's just tacked onto the invoice. It's not something that an attendee's stipend will have to go towards.
Is that a 6%?
It is, yes.
Okay, perfect. So that's a 6% for whoever asked that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 6 of every $100, pretty cost effective when you think about all the technological resources, the human capital involved, the reporting functionality that gives you some really great insight. So very cost efficient, right in line with the market.
And the last question for you is, could you work something out for an attendee who may be in a remote location for delivery? Are there options for people to do that?
I guess I would need to get a better understanding what they mean by remote. Do they mean I live in a location where, the nearest Walmart is 30 minutes away, or do they mean, I'm a remote employee?
No, remote as in they're in an area that's 30, 40 minutes away from, stuff.
Yeah, gotcha. I figured as much, but, it never hurts to be specific. Unfortunately, there's only so much that we can do. Every time you plug in your address for a delivery, there's a delivery zone, and that consists of X amount of miles. And if you're in it, you're in great shape. If you're not, then unfortunately, there's not really much that we're able to do.
Okay.
Fortunately, those instances are very few and far between.
Well, thank you very much for being on today. I really do appreciate it.